Mm.
Now, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, 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 yes. How are you doing? Greetings from Barcelona, where I'm on a bit of a world tour, as you know from the podcast. This is the latest part of the world tour. It's not a world tour, obviously. It's a little small, little schlep around the world. It's been driven by this yoke that we're going to talk about today because this has been translated now into 21 languages, which is really fantastic. And it's been published in Spain under the title, surprise, surprise, Dinero. And I'm here talking to Spanish bookshops, book publishers, trying to figure out the best way of marketing this over the next couple of months and probably over the next year in Spain. So it's been quite a whirlwind. And I said to John, the last thing I want to do is talk about my own book. But given that you have decided that this is the better course of valor is not humility, but the opposite of humility, we'll talk about the book. I just want to make sure we've got everybody on the line. Eliza, if you can talk to me, Eliza, can you explain to me again how we do this? How people react,
You
how people
open page
chat.
one and you start reading.
Oh, fuck off, John. Okay.
Yeah. Of course, if anyone has questions or wants to chime in, you press react and then raise hand, and then I will unmute you or ask you to unmute yourself and then pin you to the top. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, so it's React
Yes, and then
first.
raise hand.
Okay, so there's one quick question here I just saw came in. And how do I see the questions, Eliza? Just
So,
one more
so
time.
like I will pin them and they will be beside you, and then they can ask their question themselves on video. Do you get me? So see the way John is
Right.
here now.
Yeah,
So I will
yeah.
do that with other people. And
Okay,
then they,
fantastic.
yeah, once they
Okay.
raise their hand.
Okay, so are we all online, Eliza? Are there more coming in, or are we all good to go?
I would give it maybe 1 minute. We're at 50 now. So.
Great. 50 victims of the David McWilliams. Anyway, just to give you a little bit of background on this book, you probably know from the podcast, it took a long time to write, but most really decent efforts take a long time to write. I was in Hay on Wye this weekend in Wales. I went from the beautiful, very sophisticated, very erudite, very cosmopolitan Bilbao to Newport in South Wales, which is not a journey I'd advise anybody to go to. Newport, I was told, was actually there is a survey in the UK, I didn't realize this, called the 200 crappiest towns, and Newport was the crappiest of all the crappy towns. So I was in Newport and went up to a place called Hay on Wye. There's a big festival up there, the Hay Festival of Literature, and that was yesterday till yesterday morning. And then I came down here, and the book has basically taken on a life of its own. I You probably know it did very well. It's been published in the UK, in Ireland, it was bestseller, which is fantastic. The UK was a bestseller. It was made the Financial Times Book of the Year, one of the books of the year, the Economist Book of the Year, BBC Radio 4's Book of the Year. So it was great. It was great. And it's got a big shelf life in the United States, where it's been published in November by an outfit called Henry Holt, which is the oldest publisher in the States, the oldest imprint in the States. So it's Simon Schuster everywhere and Henry Holt in America. And you'll know from the podcast last week or the week before, I was at a large, well, actually, the biggest literary festival in South Africa called the Franschhoek Literary Festival. So it's basically been sold around the world. It's great. It's been great, and people have received. Well, it's been received very well. So that's
How many
lovely.
languages now, Mac?
It's in 21 languages, John. 21 languages.
Ooh,
But
nice.
I suspect half of them are the former Yugoslavian languages, which is Bosnian, Serbian, Croatian.
Yeah.
No, it's been bought in every territory. Japan, China, Indonesia, Thailand, Russia, Ukraine, and Russia.
Thought you were banned in Russia.
Well, it's some bought it. Somebody took it in Russia. Then we have all these Slavic languages in Eastern Europe, Spanish, Portuguese. Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
It's really cool. So it's all worthwhile. So maybe I will just tell you first the big idea in the book, which you know, and then I'm going to open up to questions and we'll do Q&A from there. I think that what animates it most for many people is probably the idea that it's a voyage from the Stone Age to Bitcoin, the history of money. It stems from the idea, and you've heard it in the podcast before, and I say this after having been a monetary economist, teach monetary economics, been an analyst, been a monetary economist literally since 1991, which is kind of a long time ago. And I really believe that after all my time working in the public sector, in the private sector, in investment banking, back out and analyzing in hedge funds, yada, 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 that economists, and this what really was a real sort of eureka moment to me, that economists really don't understand money. I know this may well come as a big shock to many people because they spend their entire time saying they understand money, but what I'm saying is they don't understand what it does to us. And the book is about the relationship between a clever ape, us, and an extraordinary technology that we made up, invented, animated, evolved into, called money. And the history of money, I think, is the history of us, humanity, number one. And number two, I don't think you can understand human nature, the human condition, humans, the fact that there's 7 billion of us now in the world, without understanding our relationship with money. I think it's much more important than religion. I think it's more important than ideology. I think it's more important than politics. It's certainly more important than the military. And I also believe that something very bizarre has happened, which is that after many, many efforts at coming up with various different ways of organizing human society, complex society, after 5,000 years of money's presence in our lives, we have ended up with societies determined by this technology money. And so we've kind of abandoned communist nirvanas, we've abandoned feudal systems, we've abandoned religious systems, we've abandoned tribal systems. And what we have is all over the world are societies based more or less on the relationship with money. And it's impossible to understand our modern world with money, but I also think it's impossible to understand our evolutionary journey as humans without money. So what I will do is, rather than grab it on, I will open it up to questions and see. I hope you enjoyed the book. I am delighted that so many of you are here. I'm delighted at how well it has gone. It may well be a Netflix documentary that's also in the offing, which could be a bit of a hoot. Although I'm not sure, having done documentaries when I was a young man, I'm not sure that I have what do you call it? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I have the face anymore for documentaries, John. I had it when I was about 28. I was a young
You
fella
have a face for
doing all this shite.
podcasting, Mark.
I have a face for Anyway, let's go. I hope you enjoyed it. Let's go for the first question. So questions about money, what you felt of the book, chapters, ideas, all that malarkey. Let's go for it. Who's got the first question? Okay. From Colin to everyone. Okay, do I get, where's Colin? Eliza, can you let Colin in on the call so I can see him and you can unmute him and we can chat.
There's actually 5 Collins here.
Shite.
I'm not sure which one it is. If Colin, if you want to raise your hand, and I can unmute
Colin's
you.
raised his hand. There's a fella there. Do you see him?
No, I mean, if you press react and then raise it, because I can't see you. Maybe you. All right, here we go. 1 second. There we go.
I can't see you, Colin, but I suspect that doesn't really matter. Where are you?
Can you hear me? I
can hear you. There you are. How are you doing? How are you? Up your top left of my screen. Great. How are you doing?
Yeah, Well, good morning from relatively sunny Penticton, BC, British Columbia, which is not home for me, David. I'm on the road as you are.
Oh,
But unlike
right. Okay.
yourself, yeah, unlike yourself, who's a globetrotter, this is unusual for me. So if you'll bear with me, I'm trying to make do in my hotel room here.
Cool, cool.
David, the book is wonderful. I really enjoyed it. Now, for those of you who read my comments occasionally on Patreon, which goes by the name Colin, you may get the mistaken impression, because I'm always nitpicking, that I tend to disagree with David a lot, but that's not really the case so much as, David, if you know your William Blake, opposition is true friendship. So the comments to be taken in that spirit, right? Because if I'm nitpicking, it means that there's minor things that I'm thinking that, about technical issues about central banks and that sort of thing, which really isn't terribly important probably to the typical listener, but that I feel obsessed about because I've been spending about a decade getting into it. But I really did enjoy the book. It's tremendous. If the thing that I kept coming back to that I struggled with a little bit, though, was your insistence on the primacy of money as the social technology that's really underpinning this, where I would argue it's actually a function of law, in the sense that money is itself an expression of sovereign power in law, right? Because everything to do with what you can own or can't own depends upon the state to support your ownership. And money's no different in that regard. But all the things you say about the psychology of it strike me as completely accurate and correct. I just kept coming back to this notion that without law, there is no money. But that doesn't mean that all the effects it has on the human psyche, as you describe them, isn't correct. So I guess that was sort of my major reaction to the book. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Colin. On the issue of law, what is fascinating is that David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, said that when humans come together, they need three things: money, law, and language. So Hume would have regarded money, law, and language as being more or less in the same bed. And the reason we need money so we can trade and understand value, we need law so we understand the rules of the game, and we need language so we can talk to each other. So I think that the money and law are very much part of the same social technology. The problem with law is you don't have law in your pocket, okay? You don't engage with the law every day in a practical, day-to-day transactional basis. So law remains ephemeral, distant, hard for people to appreciate, whereas money is something that actually is a technology that we use every single day. So I think that's the difference. But I take your point. The other thing I think is important to understand in the book, there's a distinction, and this is where law is very important, between money as currency and money as finance. And I would like everybody who reads the book to go into this idea that finance is a part of money that is the most interesting part for me. So currency for me is not important, like the thing we use on a day-to-day basis. But finance, I think, is the evolution of the monetary and legal system over the last 5,000 years. And that's where the magic of money really, really happens. I also think that's where economists don't spend enough time trying to understand the difference between currency and finance, because finance is a set, as you'd know, Colin, of obligations, promises, understandings, commitments, with punishments and consequences that actually set up the infrastructure for what I would call the great adventure of commerce, which is borrowing from an imagined tomorrow to spend today when you've no idea what tomorrow's going to look like. That I love. And that I think is the essence of finance. But great, Colin. Thanks so much for the comments. Really, really great. Thank you so much. Who is the next question? Sean, is it?
Hey, David. How are you?
I'm great, Sean. What's the crack?
All good. All good. Book was brilliant. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really was an enjoyable read. I'm the world's slowest reader, so I only kind of finished it there last week.
Like
But
myself.
really, really enjoyed it. One of the things that stuck out for me in the book was the power of money and how humans are just obsessed with it. So through your stories from the beginning, you had lads shaving a bit off a coin, always trying to make a bit, then you had Talleyrand, who was just unbelievable, the stuff that he got up to.
Yes.
Then you had the carry on that happened in the Congo, and then all the way up to present day 2008 financial crisis, where some people are just obsessed with money and will do anything to make a bit for themselves, and leave the rest of us poor sods, picking up the pieces.
Yeah, no, it's look, I tell you, the reason I told all the stories, Sean, the people, was that as I was reading about people, as a researcher, so the book is a product of the pandemic, but that would be a lie. It's actually a product of about 30 years of my own questioning in my head and stories I heard and people I met along the way. But the reason I told those stories, what kept coming back to me was the characters that were at the forefront of monetary innovation were all kind of scoundrels, swindlers, fellows you definitely wouldn't like your daughter to bring home. And all of them, but all of them were kind of fascinating. And the obsession with money, I think, is also people have bought this book, for example, is because most of us, and I would certainly love this, I would love to get really easy money on the sly and not tell a sinner, okay, and walk away, right?
Wouldn't
All
we
of us.
all?
Exactly.
Mhm.
And then the question is, why is that? So, but look, Sean, I'm delighted you enjoyed it. I told the stories to bring the story to life, to put it more of an anthropological sense, a historic sense, a storytelling sense. And I look, here's to slow readers. If you finish it, Sean, that's all good with me. So thank you very, very much indeed.
No worries. Thanks, David.
Dalmiro, I think you've got your hand up there. How are you?
Hello. No, you hear me?
Hi. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Hello, here from Argentina.
Hola.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Actually, in
Muy
Barcelona,
bien.
so if you need help with the book, happy to help.
No way. Really? You're here?
Yeah, I'm here in Barcelona. I live with my Irish girl. That's why we arrived to the podcast and we listen to you like very, very often.
No way.
Yeah, while cooking, we cook and we listen David.
Well, that's
And
great. That's great.
yeah, and I read the book, and for me it was like, do you know who is Marshall McLuhan?
Yes.
He has,
Canadian philosopher.
yes, he speaks about like the medium is the message,
Yeah.
right? Which basically, for the people who don't know him, is like how we as human evolve through the different technologies, right? So like people who only communicate by phone was very good at listening and paying attention, and politics could speak like for a long time. But nowadays, people has a shorter attention because we are with a shorter like stimulation, right?
Yeah, with this thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but also if you see how this evolved through the years, how we really changed. Yeah.
True.
And for me, like understanding money as a technology and seeing how humanity evolved as with this technology, it reminded me to McLuhan, right? About like how
Okay.
the media is the message, how like French people come with like 20 because of what they could see when they invented the language, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to like bring that to the table and ask you, how do you see this future with like a new technology is coming, as is the AI, and as will probably be the communication, in a moment that a new economy is needed, right? And how
Yeah.
these technologies will evolve for you, in your view.
Yeah, I think very good question, Dalmiro. Well, and also you're very lucky to live in this city. My God, such a gorgeous place. Although a little bit overrun now, I must admit, with tourists. I was up the road. I just, Jesus Christ, there's a lot of tourists here. Anyway, we can talk about that again. I think that one of the arguments I have in the book is that money is a technology and technologies are consistently used to solve problems. So, and to adapt to the changing world. So as we move to a more digital economy, I think money will change and will become much more digital. I think, for example, central bank digital currencies are probably very, very likely. I think that was going to be the way in which the digital world. I mean, for example, I use this. I haven't used any euros today. Everything I do is digital, right? Tapping, chatting, online, whatever, buying, selling, etc. So I think that the most important message in the book is not to make this great prophecy about what the future is like, but just to tell the historical story and say that at every stage, money adapts to what is going on. Okay? It's flexible, it is non-ideological, it is non-sovereign in a way. It's actually, it's cosmopolitan, it flows between countries. And my sense is that over the course of the next 20 years, as the economy becomes more digital, money will become more digital. But that does not mean that it's the future is crypto. I was noticing today the headline of the Financial Times just now, I've just come back to my hotel room, is that the Trump family have amassed a war chest to buy crypto. Number one, to buy crypto. Number two, to flog crypto, to grift crypto. I don't think, Dalmiro, and this is a very important point, that the future of money is private. I think money is a public good. I think it is issued by the state in the same way as the police force, the Guardia Civil at the road, are not a private vigilante firm, but they're a public institution, hopefully at some degree answerable to the Spanish or Catalonian government. So yes, I believe that the future is digital, but no, I don't believe the future is crypto. So there you go. And by the way, I'll give you the address of I'm here with Lucy, my daughter, who you might hear sometimes on the thing. So I'll give you the address of the place we're going. We're going later on. Hold on, tell me where the tapas bar is, if you want to have a drink. Oh, wait. Can't even get my bloody phone right. Wait a second. We're either going to a place called Ciutat Comtat, Ciutat Comtat, or Cantrezo.
What's the name of the bar?
Cantrezo, Cantreso.
Cantrezo.
Okay, Cantrezo, or the other bar is called. This is the great thing. You go online and you actually end up going for a drink. This is how it should be, guys.
You're buying though, Delmiro.
Oh yeah, you're always buying. You're buying with
No
crypto.
problem.
You're buying with Bitcoin. Ciutat Ciutat Comtal Comtal. Close to Plaza Catalunya, given by a great Irish journalist called Richard Fitzpatrick, who lives here, but has got the common sense not to meet me on a Wednesday night. But there you go, on a Monday night, whatever night. Close to. Hold on,
Ciutat Comtal.
Wait. I'll get it. It's coming up here. Ciutat Comtal.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to one of those two bars. Okay, and I'll be there at about 9:30 or 10 o'clock for a bit of tapas, if you fancy it.
I will see you there, of course.
Okay, well,
Amazing.
brilliant. Okay, cool. See you there, guys.
Bye.
Now, tell me more. Who else has got a question?
Maureen Walsh.
Maureen Walsh. Maureen, I can't see it. How are you, Maureen?
Unmute.
If you
Can you hear
unmute
me?
yourself, I can hear you right now.
Yeah.
now
Hi,
loud
how are
and
you,
clear.
David?
I'm great, Maureen. How are you?
I'm jealous of you going off your tapas.
Aren't we all?
Now, I don't know, I'm kind of lost now in my question. I really enjoyed the crypto piece. I thought that was really clear, and I certainly wouldn't be investing in it after it. But I get it that it's a speculative venture and you could make money out of it if you get lucky. But that's really seems to be what it boils down to. And I liked the comparison with M-Pesa. You know, it really properly explained why one. But it was the bit about capital formation and the fact that that's one of the shortcomings of crypto, that it doesn't in fact create any cash flow or income. And
Yeah.
I think I have a bit of a bugbear about platforms and the like of Jeff Bezos at the top of one of these. And like, I'm just wondering, is there a similar argument? I can't really work out what my problem is with platforms. I suppose it's the idea that they kind of free of charge feed into a world market and cream off the top. And they don't, is there a kind of a similar argument to be made that they don't actually contribute to capital formation? Is that where my problem is? That they don't actually, I mean, there's much less money created locally, and it doesn't in the way that M-Pesa does. It doesn't, because they keep one man gets all the money, so to speak. And my second question is, if governments were so concerned about backing money with their guarantee, how did crypto ever get off the ground in the first place? I mean, why did people suddenly trust in, this money that came? I know that Bitcoin sells on the basis that it's in a limited supply, but you don't seem to think that that's. I mean, I'd want to. I mean, how is it that people would invest so much money in crypto, whilst at the same time, really, how do you trace back to where your money's gone? I mean,
I think that, first of all, lots of things are in limited supply, but they're not money. Okay.
No.
So the idea that something's in a limited supply doesn't mean anything. Actually, it means actually fuck all, right?
Yeah.
And it's certainly so. So, for example, every single commodity in the world is in minimal supply, but they are some sort of fixed supply, but they're not money. That's the first thing.
But does that not give them value? Does that not give them value? And therefore,
but that doesn't make them money. This is the whole thing.
It doesn't make them money. Okay.
Right. So one of the arguments in the book is that something that is hoarded might have value. Okay. So crypto, gold, Bitcoin, copper, silver, whatever you hoard, right? Okay. But it actually goes against what makes money interesting. So what makes money most interesting is the fact that it's used, that it's actually not that it's hoarded, that it's used. And this is the sort of counterintuitive thing about money, is that what makes it valuable for society is the fact that it's used by everybody. So therefore it can't be by definition something that's hoardable. It has to have this weird sort of combination of qualities. One is that, yes, it has a value, but two, we all use it. The problem with hoarding is a thing called Gresham's law in economics, which is that basically that the bad money will basically elbow at the good money. And by that is that people will spend the money they think is going to lose value, and they'll hoard the money they think is going to keep in value. And as a result of that, you destroy the monetary system. So I think that the first thing is that hoarding is a signal of value, but it's not a signal of money. That's the first thing. And the second thing, because money has to be something that maintains its value, but is sufficiently without value that we all spend it. And it's a hard thing to get your head around, but that's actually what it is. Secondly, as for platforms, well, that's kind of a function of our new world, where the amplification of rewards is going increasingly to the people who own the platforms. So, you take the Jeff Bezos, he owns Amazon. In the old days, there would be 100,000 retailers, shops on the main street, shops in your corner, shops in your village, shops in your town, all retailing, making a few quid, passing on products to people. And I think it's just that one of the bizarre upshots of the internet has been the extraordinary ability of one dominant player to very quickly gain all or most of the goodies. And that's the Amazon story. It's a function of our times. Will it lead to monopolies being smashed by governments if they get too big? Maybe it will. I think it might do. But at the moment, you're absolutely right. It's a winner takes all market. So the best way to look at
the fact that, because you see in the normal traditionally businesses and everything associated with them, their goodwill and the value of them grew because you started off and then you built the next business and then you built the next business and the next one, and every time you grew. There were more people employed. There were and more, I suppose, capital formation, as you're saying, and all around it. So, but that's, you see, that my problem is that the internet gives you immediate access to a global market. That's fine, but why aren't there regulations around it and around the notion of one person jumping on a world market that they don't own? And that's what I don't get. Because it's no surprise to me that Trump has now aligned himself with the biggest players in this world. and it's that was absolutely obvious for
Well, I
anyone who
think
understood
Maureen,
that.
I think let's stick to the book, right? We
Yeah.
will, right? Okay, let's stick
Yeah.
to the history of money, and we will discuss markets, Trump, all that malarkey later on. So
Okay,
thanks a lot for the
perfect.
question, but I'll come back to it. But I think we stick to the book for the book
We
club
will.
this time around.
No worries.
Great stuff. Who's got the next question? I see up there, hand up. Who's got the next question? Raise your hand, wave at me, and say hello.
Samsung SMA546B.
Hello, Samsung.
Hello. Well, I'm known also as Olivia.
Hello, Olivia.
So I don't know what happened there, but I'm a great fan of the book. I'm a great fan of the podcast. I'd even go to say that probably my children would say I'm a bit of a groupie, but a secret groupie.
Groupies are great.
I have a 10-year-old and she talks all the time about David and John or the musicians. So
Brilliant.
I'm delighted to be here. So I'm delighted to be talking to you. So I loved the book, and I have two probably very boring questions, but one always bothered me. And the thing is, how can sterling have remained so strong in light of its declining economic strength? Because I always thought currency and strength of economy was always related, but it just doesn't seem to work when it comes to sterling. And I just think it's all kind of made up sometimes. And then the second question is in relation to the reserve currency and the dollar. How likely is what's going on in America now? How likely is it that the US will lose the status of the reserve currency? And what would it be, the euro that might step in? And does the euro just step in and become the reserve currency, or what has to happen for that to change?
Okay, Liv, two very good questions there, right? First of all, it's sterling, right? If we go back in history, sterling was $5 was worth one sterling just before the Second World War. It's now almost 1-to-1. So sterling is 20% of its value that it had before the Second World War. So sterling is absolutely a currency on the slide. It just slides very, very slowly. So your point is absolutely valid. As the warning actually, and it's related to your second question, right? So sterling was the premier currency in the world before the First World War. I can't remember what chapter it is on the book. I think it's in the chapter about Hitler, and it's a chapter about I think it's a chapter about Hemingway. It starts with Hemingway. It talks about sterling, but sterling has lost 80% of its value, maybe 85% of its value over the last 70 years. So it has fallen in value, but we don't feel that because we're not looking back at history. It's very, very good. Well, isn't it very good? It's a reasonably interesting framework through which to look at the dollar now, because the dollar, in my opinion, is being undermined quite drastically by Mr. Trump. But it's not only been undermined by Trump. Trump is just accelerating a process that has been happening for quite some time, which is that as the United States becomes a debtor nation, not a creditor nation, the fragility of its currency becomes increasingly apparent to people. I think I am worried a lot about the dollar. And the reason I'm worried about it is there's no obvious alternative right now to the dollar, right? It's not as if the Chinese currency is an alternative. The euro is an alternative in the sense that it's a currency of well-managed economies with a proper central bank, with a certain amount of economic heft behind it. But it's not in the position now to take over from the dollar just yet. What I fear is a rapid depreciation of the American currency based on a moment where people realize, A, the Americans have a very, very, very large debt to GDP ratio. It's about 120% of GDP at the moment. They think it's about 36 trillion. GDP is about 30 trillion, maybe a bit higher. They have a $2 trillion budget deficit every year, and they are paying out at present day interests rates about 1.6 trillion in interest payments alone. All the while you have a president who is pumping crypto, okay? Who is backing a currency that is actually the opposite of the dollar, right? So I'm worried, you know, and the reason I'm worried is the financial system doesn't have a replacement for the dollar. And a world in which the dollar begins to lose its value would be a very scary one. So we will do a few podcasts on this, and actually we might kick off tomorrow's podcast on it. But yeah, I'm worried about it for the first time ever. In fact, when I was writing the book, I finished the book around this time last year. I didn't feel that there was an enormous amount of need to worry about the dollar so much. Now I think I do feel, because I think Trump inherited an economy from Biden. Let's get this right. He didn't create it himself. Biden accelerated profoundly the debt profile. But all the time people thought, well, you know, America will do the right thing. And now I don't think people are that sure of that, Olivia. So 2 very interesting questions, and thank you very much. I'm delighted you enjoyed the book, and I'm also delighted that your children are traumatized by your affection for myself and John.
That's okay. Family mateless as well, so you know we balance it a little bit.
Great. Who's up next? Who's up next? Stephen, is it? Or Anna or Sean? Stephen. How are you?
Hello. Okay. Right. This might follow on from the previous question. Very generally, reading about the history of money, it seems to have started with money backed by precious metals. And as time goes by, the metal in it gets diluted. And eventually you get what you refer to as fiat money. And that has, it seems to be, I have some notes, a lot more flexible, is very good for growth, where asset-backed money currency can be quite constrictive. However, it's based on something which is, you know, for want of a better word, solid. You know, with fiat money, it does tend to be based on trust. So following on from the other one about lack of a reserve currency, in the future, do you ever see a currency, let's say, coming for which is based again on precious metals, or something which is a bit of a, if possible, could be a bit of both, based on trust, a bit of fiat money and metals? Because I think I read that the BRICS were thinking about creating their own reserve currency, and that was going to be based on silver and gold.
A very interesting question. Look, I mean, the thing about when you start writing a book like this, and you start thinking about these things, what you really end up, and it's trite, but never say never, right? Because what it shows you is expedience, adaptation, things just happen and people react. I think that there is a standard. So basically people talk about the standard, like the gold standard or the copper standard or the silver standard. And that's the asset against which money derives its kind of intrinsic value. I think we have a standard. It is a basket of goods. It's called the rate of inflation in all mature democracies. That's the price against which the central banks react to and set interest rates. So I think that it would be inaccurate to describe the fiat currency as not having a standard. It's just the standard is the basket of goods, which is called consumer inflation. And therefore, if inflation is allowed to go through the roof, the currency will fall. But usually inflation going through the roof is a reflection that we're printing too much money. So that's the sort of the discretionary balance. Could I see dual, triple currencies with various different standards? Yeah, probably. It's not. I wouldn't rule it out. But it's not really on the cards just at the moment.
Would an asset-based currency or a mix of asset-based currency would that be better in checking inflation then? Because it would have a constrictive effect on the economy, which is the downside.
Yeah, no, I happen to think that there's not much wrong, believe it or not, with the international financial system. I really do. I don't believe that there's something so obnoxiously wrong with the system that we need to reinvent it. I think it actually works. I think it works surprisingly well. And I think fiat money, as I said in the book, has been an amazing period of human development. And I don't see where the massive problem with the Bitcoiners and the gold bugs is. I really don't, other than the sense that somebody is robbing them of their intrinsic value of their money. And I don't see the way the economy has behaved as reflecting that.
Well, I suppose, thank you. I suppose it might come back to what you originally mentioned, David Hume's comments about what was the three things and
language, law, money.
Yeah. And law seems to be the biggest question mark at the moment, I think, where people may not be obeying stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Anna, I see you've got your hand. Sean, I've spoken to Sean. So Anna, you've got your hand up there. Let's have Anna in first before Sean. We take Sean again.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Lovely. Sorry, my laptop keeps crashing out. So if my face freezes in an awkward position, please forgive me.
We'll take photos and we put it up online.
Don't. So I read the book. It was my Christmas read. So I hope I could put together my thoughts properly because it's been a while. But what stood out to me from the book was, I think, David, you were kind of making the point that money isn't the root of all evil. It's actually an incredibly good thing, and it just has very bad PR. But but when I was reading, and not to go back to a book we've already covered, but when I was reading Humankind, I found that he makes the point that money, not necessarily that money itself is evil, but it has led to a growth in, the bad apples and evil players in the world. So I more so just wanted to get your thoughts on, why do you think so many people do have this perception that money leads to evil? And how do you say
Yeah, no. It's a really good question, and it's something that when I was writing the book kept coming back to me, because I was brought up in the catechism that money is the root of all evil, that the meek will inherit the earth, and that if you want to understand where all human calamity comes from, it comes from this thing, money. And then I realized that that's one way of looking at money, but the other way of looking at money is, if it was the root of all evil, why has it survived so long? Because surely humans would come up with a better way of figuring things out. And if it was the root of all evil, why are there, 7-8 billion of us living in a monetary system reasonably peacefully? I mean, we have wars going on, but in general, humans cooperate at a scale which is kind of unprecedented. And when I look at money, I think, hold on a second, I much prefer the Marshall Mouse idea that in order to trade, man first needs to throw down the spear. That's that French sociologist. And money allows us to trade, and money is an alternative to war. And the reason I think this is so self-evident is because we live in a planet of 7 billion people, which has got finite resources, and we're not killing each other all the time. So that's, I think it's kind of self-evident that money is not the root of all evil. But I think I think I say in the book that one of the things that interested me was why Christianity emerged when it did and where it did and how it did. Because the Christianity's philosophy is very, very different to what went before. What went before was basically the big tough gods are the macho fellas. They're kind of like Zeus and his mates, and they're going around and they're throwing fireballs and might is right. And then Jesus comes along with this weird message, says, no, might is not right. In fact, might is wrong. And the people who are mighty now will actually be the last later on. And I thought that it's no coincidence that Jesus emerged after about 150 years of the first really hyper-monetized society, the Greek civilization, and then the Romans. And I thought that the Christian message was a countervailing message to the losers in the monetary world, which I understand completely, because in the old world, if you were poor, you were because the gods determined you were poor. But if you were poor in the New World is because in some way you couldn't understand money, and that was out of merit, and therefore you really deserve your place. So they had to come up with a new philosophy. So although Humankind is a lovely book, I don't think that the accusation that money is the root of all evil stands any proper analysis of the reason why we still use it. Because humans avoid evil as a general rule. Humans lean into good. Humans lean into cooperation. Humans lean into collaboration. And I think money makes that possible. But it's up for discussion. It's definitely a pub conversation. There's no doubt about that one. No doubt about that one.
Mm.
All right, who's next up? Who hasn't spoken yet?
Donna, iPad.
Hi everyone. Hi John. Hi David. Thanks, David. Smashing book. Actually, if the truth be known, last night the feeling of racing through it was as close to doing my homework on Sunday night as I felt for about,
you needed some cog notes
for about 30 years. But anyway, so it was great though, and actually I'm still I've a couple of chapters to go at the end, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's really apart from enjoying it, it sort of woke me up to reflection on the fundamental history of money and helped me to a good understanding of it. And as recently as Saturday, helping me, even frame the way I was reading some of the articles in the FT. And in particular, and related to, I'm sorry, the person who asked about sterling and the conversation then that transitioned to your worries about the dollar. Anybody who's interested in that, there is a very good article on the back of the Financial Times by Katie Martin last Saturday. And it's called "The EU Can Do More to Challenge the Dollar's Global Reserve Status." Right. But for anyone who's read the book and in relation to that last question, there are, a whole lot of bullseyes being hit there. But, you can go back to the Romans, or you can go back as recently to the downgrading of, the Romans' dilution of the value of money and the debasing of coinage, or whether it's Moody's downgrading of American, of the dollar or whatever, based on the things you're worried about, David. To the good line in it, Moody's took the plunge, stripping the US of its coveted AAA rating on startling similar grounds: a political inability to tame fiscal incontinence, right? And
yes.
I was thinking, it goes back to, cases you sketched around what happened in Rome, debasing, etc., and it's still potentially applicable today in the case of the dollar. So, reading your book helped me, sort of read what Katie Martin had written in with a bit more perspective and a more considered light. And then for all of you then, the rest of the article is quite interesting as to, why the euro really should seek to behave more like aspire to be a reserve currency, and has, a lot of the qualities that may be required, but it hasn't got, the liquidity. It can't be used as extensively or as freely as the dollar, etc. But that's enough from me. Read the article and you'll get the.
Thank you very much for that, Donna. Katie Martin, you'll know, has been on the pod a few times.
Yeah.
She's a friend of the pod. She's an old mate of mine. She comes to Kilkenomic. She's a great writer, and she's one of the FT's, I think, sharpest writers. So thank you very much for that, Donna. Donna, who's the next? Garrett, is it? Garrett's got a hand up. Sorry about this, Sean. I know you've got hands up, but we're going to try and be democratic. Garrett, you have your hand up. I can't hear you.
Unmute. Apologies. I just talking with my team.
Where are you? Where are you? At the back garden?
It's just landed a helicopter, it looks like.
I'm cutting in a state lawn.
Great stuff.
Yeah, so I was listening to it, but yeah, and I just literally told the lads, right, we're putting this stuff in and we're going to move to the next phase, and they're like, oh shit. No, one of my favorite things that you actually said was the technology on money. And one thing that I always thought of money as being was like a store of energy, was something that I think you said before, and I really liked it as an idea of how you can move money around, and the way money, you can have a euro here, and it'll motivate somebody to actually get up and do something, because they want that money for the energy it will release for them, for either food or for Netflix or whatever they're looking for. I find it a very interesting thing. But the one thing I'm interested in at the moment is the decision process that's being made now. And apologies, it's starting to rain. I'd like to be in Barcelona. But is the decisions that are being made at the moment, and there's always a lag time within decisions that I can see. But what I'm finding interesting is watching Donald Trump and the decisions he's making with the change in the euro or in the dollar. And I don't think it's been felt, or it'll take months for it to be seen. But the destruction of the energy that they have in the dollar, like where do you think it could go, or how long will it be before people have that realization?
Garrett, notwithstanding what Donna was saying there, and it's very, very community spirited of you to be cutting the lawns of other people. That's very impressive. Because there's still all sorts of.
Don't worry, I get lots of energy from that.
Right. No, I think, look, my fear is, right, when sterling, I go back to the sterling question. When sterling started to lose ground, right, the dollar emerged as the obvious replacement for sterling. And then when the Americans won the Second World War, they ensured that they put together an entire infrastructure which put the dollar at the center of the world economy. So they were very clever, very self-serving, but very far-sighted. I'm looking around now. The euro is, because we don't have a unified fiscal policy, because we don't have actually a unified banking system, it's a little bit more a currency on its way to becoming something. Right, it's a very good currency. It's been very strong. It's done an incredible job over the last 15 or 20 years. It's a 25-year-old creature this year, I think. So it's done an amazing job of keeping the European economy together, all that sort of stuff. But it's not necessarily, they don't have the ambition to be the world reserve currency. The Chinese have no interest in being the reserve currency at all. They don't want the responsibility of that, because there is a responsibility being the reserve currency. You have to bail out the rest of the world when the rest of the world comes looking for dollars. So when the rest of the world comes looking for dollars, the Americans have to give it to the rest of the world. The Chinese don't want to do that. So there's no obvious, the yen is not obvious. So there's no obvious inheritor of that mantle at the moment. So that's why I'm worried. And as you say about Donald Trump, it's not just that Trump, it's not that Trump has actively undermined the dollar, he may be, but it's just that he happens to be in power at a time when it's becoming apparent that America is no longer the superpower it used to be. It still is 22%, I think, of global GDP, about 5% of global population. That means that, 95% of people in the world are not Americans, and 80% of global GDP is not American. So we don't have anybody yet and any currency to take over, and that's why it's worrying. And that's why I think people are anxious. So thank you for that. Thank you for that question. Brilliant. Brilliant stuff.
My lad's working for me also. Thank you for the time.
Cheers, lads. What's the crack? All right.
Thank you.
Dara, you've got your law of Suez there. Dara, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Dara, how are you?
Great. No, thank you very much. In my case, it was the audiobook, and again, over Christmas. I should say that I'm an oncologist at the NIH, just outside of DC.
Okay.
I don't know how much that is being followed, but we had a somewhat interesting town hall from Jay Bhattacharya, who I think by background is a health economist from Stanford. It wasn't the greatest of experiences in the world. I'm sure you'll see ample commentary on that. But it brought me back to something I'd wondered for a while. Does one run into the issue in economics, the economics profession, that on the one hand, you have the people who try and see it as a social science in much more broad terms, dare I say yourself, Minsky, Keynes, versus those who seem to suffer from a horrendous degree of physics envy, to use a cliche, and just try and reduce everything to pure accounting. Now, I just find that, to use that whole phrase, there seems to be a view of trying to know the price of everything and the value of nothing. And this terribly reductionist view of short-term accounting. And really...
Well, Dara, I think you've put your finger on something very interesting. I happen to think that economics is a branch of what we used to call moral philosophy. And moral philosophy was regarded as very much this sort of a branch of humanities certainly up to the Second World War. So moral philosophy took in sociology, took in politics, a certain amount of literature, humanities, a certain amount of soft sciences, and economics would find itself in that position. The problem with moral philosophy is it's ambiguous. It's a matter of opinion. It's a matter of not just opinion, but garnering evidence without necessarily knowing where you're going to go. And the thing about physics and physics envy is it replaces ambiguity with precision. But I think when it gains in precision, when it comes to economics, it loses in relevance. And if we take that idea that what you gain in precision, you lose in relevance, then the question is, why be precise if you're irrelevant? And so I think you're absolutely right. I think that one of the big dilemmas for oncology, for the health system, is this idea of straight lines, is this idea of unambiguous conclusions as to where money is spent. And that is a form of what I call kind of bullying accountancy rather than economics. So the reason I wrote a book like this, Dara, and took, I think, a bit of biology, I think of anthropology, a bit of history, a bit of hopefully that thing we used to call common sense, some observations, didn't really end up with a definitive, and this is the way the world's going to be, rather let the reader say, okay, that's interesting, that's more weaponry to deploy to understand the world, is because I do believe that economics is part of moral philosophy, and you can't have definitive answers. And I think it's soul destroying when economists try to take the creature at the middle of economics called human beings and ascribe to that bizarre ape characteristics that are definitive, predictable, and ultimately physics-led, when we know that I think I said in the book, 19th century economics is much more interesting because it looked at biology as its bedfellow. And I think biology and evolution have a lot more to offer when looking at society and how this society changes and evolves and adapts. So, but listen, thank you very much for that, Dara. And you, at least one of us does a proper job. Who actually really helps people. Okay, who's next up? Mike Brady, I see.
Hi, David. Hi, John. Hi, Eliza. Love the podcast. And book was brilliant.
Thank you.
Maybe I met you actually in London at the launch with my son. If you remember,
Oh yes, I remember it. I remember. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. We call ourselves the Cork Ultras,
Yes. The
Right.
Cork City Ultras they're small, but
Absolutely. A simpler question maybe than some of the ones gone before. You mentioned about that there's no replacement kind of for the financial system, etc. I was lucky enough to be in Fiji there last month, and during COVID, tourism is their main industry, and everything shut down there. And like young people who live in the towns and villages there, they went back, or living in the main towns, went back to their parents up in the hills and the little villages, And it made me think, what would happen? Like everything is becoming very digital now. Like you mentioned with your phone today, I'm the same. Don't carry any cash anymore. it's very easy to switch that off, you know. And what would happen if the system? My question is, what would happen if the system was turned off?
Mike, I'll tell you what. Fascinating thing is, I'm doing a podcast tomorrow from Spain, right? Because I'm here and I like sharing this, right? 10 days ago, Spanish electricity went off.
Yeah.
Power outed in this country, right? And that was a really interesting, and I'm going to talk to a guy about this, an Irish guy called Joe Haslam, who's actually from Cork. He's a professor here. What that does to society, when you realize just how fragile our existence is. So something happened in the Spanish electricity grid. I don't know if you heard about this, about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. And Portugal as well.
The whole Iberian Peninsula, right?
Yeah.
Electricity, phones went, everything went, right? Trains, everything that's based on the grid. And it was almost like it was almost like one of those kind of apocalyptic, the day after sort of movies. So I think that we will do this tomorrow on the podcast. I won't preempt what Joe's going to say to me, but I found it really fascinating because I rang friends of mine in Spain last week. And they said it was the weirdest fucking experience.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
They said it was
Like
so weird because
you
all
mentioned
stuff we're doing.
You mentioned intrinsic value, and I don't know if you remember our conversation. I'm an agricultural consultant, advise landowners around the country, and that's where the intrinsic value of land would come back into fore, I think, you know.
Mm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go and have a look at, Eliza, can you throw up all the questions that are coming in? Because we're nearly out of time, and just see if we can, if you can throw up the questions
Do you
there.
mean the ones that are in the chat?
Yeah.
There's more of a conversation going on.
Okay, so they're having a chat. Okay, that's great.
Yeah, but there's a few questions for you. Do you want me to read them out, or if you press the
Yeah, just
chat button on your laptop?
Read them out. Well, you know me now. This is my well beyond me.
I'll read them out 1 second.
Yeah.
To stop you, John. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's all chat. Okay, could the English be the same beneficiaries of the sterling as the Greeks were of the drachma, or the Americans and the dollar? There's the first question.
Where is this? Who
It
said that?
Brian Grebe in the chat.
Brian Grebe.
That's our friend Brian Grebe in California.
Do you want? He has
Brian.
his hand up if you'd like to jump in.
Okay, shoot, Brian. Yeah, could. Okay.
Hey, how you doing there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, good, yeah. Well, basically the question was, I was fascinated. You said, here are the Greeks who can't even feed themselves. They have this coin that's going all around the Mediterranean. The goods are coming in. It sort of explains the English too. You know what I mean? They had this worldwide empire, and if you're sitting in London, you're just using sterling. It's kind of the same idea. So when the Brits fall, it's a slow fall, but sterling was this big value currency and just starts doing this over time. As could happen to the dollar, as could happen to any currency, really.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the Greek, again, what interests me about the Greeks was, here's this incredible civilization that emerged and they couldn't feed themselves. That really interests me, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. And that they had no really massive standing army. They had these little, as I said in the book, city-states, which were around the Aegean, around the Black Sea, around the Mediterranean. They were unified by a language, by a philosophy, by a currency, but they couldn't feed themselves. So
all currency language, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we're back to the same ideas, you know? And these are the social technologies that really bind us together. And I think make amazing things happen. The British Empire was an extraordinary achievement for a tiny country, right? You know, Irish people, we might get pissed off and say they were this, that, and the other, but that small country, it was really interesting. I was down in South Africa, as you know, last week doing these gigs, and I was talking to an African guy, and he was at one of the gigs, and he came up to me afterwards, and he said, "How did they do it?" And I said, "What? Who do what?" He said, "How did the British, this tiny country, take over the world?" And it's an amazing story. And it is also the story of money. That the British Empire was an empire of credit, an empire of commerce. And they did it the same way as the Greeks did it. They took over the world through commerce and through credit. And the United States now are probably at the peak of a credit empire. And that's fair enough. But the question is, who comes next? And that I don't know, because it doesn't seem to me that the Chinese have any interest in filling a global gap, a multilateral gap. They're doing bilateral trade deals with lots of people, and they don't seem to have any inclination to go around the world conquering places and kicking the shit out of them, which is kind of good. Great. Okay, Brian. Okay, who has the next question? We're going to do two more, and then we are.
Sean is still there.
Yeah. Okay, Sean, go for it. Go for it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm back in. I'm taking all the limelight here.
That's John usually does that.
A quick one. You probably touched on it already, but the creation of money, I thought was a fascinating. Coming into fiat money and how money is actually created, where it's just magicked into a bank account, and kind of the relationship of debt and money. And then if you bring it back to the way you think some economists don't understand money. Do you mean like economists are always trying to balance the books, where they don't realize, if I'm going to back myself, I'm going to take out a loan and open a business and use that money to create value? That's kind of what Gareth spoke about earlier, where he goes out and cuts someone's grass. They give him 20 quid for that. They're after getting something of value from the money, and the money has kind of allowed that transaction to happen.
Yeah. Well, I think Sean, like if one of the strangest things when I was in college doing macroeconomics, so pretty reasonably sophisticated stuff. A lot of the professors said that we are assuming that money is neutral. By that they meant that money has no real animating force in the economy. And I couldn't understand that. I really couldn't. I thought, no, that's not how the world works, because money is what propels us to do good things, bad things, innovative things, horrible things, all that stuff. Not only is it not neutral, it's actually unbelievably powerful. So what I mean by that is, like, an economist, I think I say it in the book, like, if you ask a plumber, how does water travel around the house? They'll be really able to explain you. They'll talk about gravity, and pipes, and pressure, and taps, and all that sort of stuff, right? But if you go for a drink with that plumber after he's basically told you about the water, and you say, okay, that's interesting how the water goes around the house. Why do you think water is essential for life? I think the plumber would be hard pressed to give you an answer, right? Okay, it's about molecular chemistry, about biology, yeah, right? So I think economists are the same. They're like plumbers. They can tell you, or my tribe, like this, I've done this for years. We can tell you, if you turn on the spigots and there's too much money and inflation here, and it goes through the banking system there, and the rate of interest here, and yeah. But if you ask economists, what does money do to humans? What does it do to us? They never, ever answer that question. So the book is an effort to answer that question through the lens of history. And I think that's where money has its absolutely magical qualities, characteristics, its magical essence is that money changes us profoundly, and we change money. And I'll conclude here, which is why I said at the top of the book that we are a plutophyte species. We were a pyrophyte species, a species that was determined by and adapted to fire for the first 400,000 years of our existence. And I now believe that we are a plutophyte species, that is a species that adapts to and is constantly adapted by money, which is the technology that we invented. And the fascinating thing about money is it doesn't actually exist. It's entirely in our imagination. And that's what I think gives it this extraordinary story and compelled me to write the story. And this is one of many books on money. And I'm delighted that you guys enjoyed it because it was a hoot writing it, believe it or not, even though John will tell you I was like a demon in the final edits. It's like, fucking hell, Jesus
It was torturous,
Christ.
but it's brilliant.
But the thing is, all good work is torturous. Everything that is decent is hard and difficult, right? And if things come too easy, they're not good enough. So you have to always swat away.
Well, you certainly
Now-
put the effort in, Mac.
Always do, John. Always do. Listen, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you all for being online. We will come up with and we'll give you the next book club, the Difficult Dopamine Hit, for next month, and we'll figure out what the book is. But thank you all very much for suggesting this book. Yes, Eliza.
David, I think you suggested Elif Shafak when she was on the podcast, if you wanted to do her book next.
Oh, well, that'd be interesting. We'd like
Yeah.
to do a little bit of fiction, a little bit of
Well, we
fiction
could-
with. Go on.
Yeah, you can think about it, but like I just thought it was said before in passing.
Okay, Elif. Okay,
And
well, that'd be great.
she's emailed me and wants to come on Zoom as well to talk as well.
Okay, well, let's do
So-
Elif Shafak, guys. We'll give you her. I mean, her back catalogue
Yeah.
is amazing. It's amazing.
She's
Brilliant.
yeah.
And she's coming to Dalkey, so we'll have
Yeah.
her. We'll have her live knocking around here. Well, not around here, but around home. All right.
You don't know where you are, Mac.
Tal luego, as they say around these parts, Johnny boy. Tal luego.
Good stuff.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.